Okay, so do I take that as a everything is going gravy? You all are great coders working on an amazing prototype.
I actually have a question. So,
Okay, great.
so we set up all the Git push pull stuff, but
Mhm.
whenever I push my files, I guess it doesn't like come up on the GitHub, like the repository. So I don't know. Do they have to be like, because I stage the changes and then like approve them to go, but then
Mhm.
whenever we look at the website, it's just not there.
So is the code itself on GitHub changing?
No.
Like, so it's not even showing up on the merge pull request?
No.
Would you mind maybe sharing your screen? We can take a
Um,
look.
okay. 1 second, because I switched computers. And so it might be, I don't know if I set it up on this one. Actually, go ahead. I'll figure out
Okay,
my
great.
computer
We can
situation.
talk about it maybe later during the break.
Okay, thank you.
Um, Okay, so I know there's still a few Git issues. I mean, worst case, you can always just directly edit the code on GitHub, and then that will show up on the site. So that's definitely one option. Um, oh, shoot, how do I've got this. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'll get started on talking a little bit into some advanced JavaScript, mainly arrays, objects, and then cookies, and how you can use them in your site. Basically, how we can use these concepts in order to create a almost like a pseudo backend coding language within our JavaScript. So before we get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about debugging JavaScript. So the easiest way that I've found to debug JavaScript is by using the dev tools that are available in pretty much every browser. So in the example of Chrome, what you would do is right click and then click inspect. And this could be anywhere on the page. If you right click a button or an image, it might show up something different. So you usually want to sort of right click in the white space of a website. And then you'll see this inspect option on the bottom. And when you do that, this DevTools console will show up where you can actually see the code that is used to create the web page that you're currently visiting. So you can do this on any of your favorite web pages. Some of them will look cleaner than others, but you can essentially see the code that's behind it and then make changes to it in real time. So the first element that shows up in the dev tools is actually called elements. And when you look at elements, you can actually highlight the different lines of code and it will show you what those lines correspond to on the screen. And I'll actually show you an example of this on KGI's website. Let me actually go back here. Okay, so So here you can see KGI's website. Can you all see KGI's website? Let me get thumbs up. Okay, great. So I'm going to right click and I can do this inspect. Now, when I do inspect, I can actually see this is the code that powers KGI's website. And if I highlight certain parts of it, it will actually show you what they go to. So here's the site header. And if I wanted to, within the header, I can just keep opening these carets. And I know I'm in the right spot if that part ends up being highlighted. So now I'm in this container. And I just keep opening them up until I see what I want. Let's play with the menu thing. Okay. So I want to change this menu. Okay, so I found it just by drilling down. And if I right click, I can edit the text and then call this maybe something like start. There, so I just changed on KJ's website menu to start. I could also maybe add some style. So if I wanted to say style equals color red, Now suddenly that start turns to red. Now, I haven't hacked KGI's webpage. This is only what's showing up on my browser, but it can be a quick and easy way to see if I change a little thing here or there, what will that look like on an existing web page? Another thing that I could do is I could look at these. So this is the HTML. Down below here is my CSS. So I could change certain CSS elements. So here's site header. I'm not sure what this actually is, but they have their color as FFF, which is just a code for white. I could change this maybe to red. Oops. Okay. So let's change that to red. Now, when I do that, it looks like it might have changed that. Let's change this back to white. Okay, no, so site header must be something else. But you can play around with all of these different elements. If I want to change, a CSS styling or the HTML itself, I'm able to do that. Any questions about that?
I used the inspect option to like see what this one website was doing, but I wasn't able to copy and paste it into mine.
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, honestly, I don't usually use that to actually get code because a lot of websites will jumble their code. KGI's website is actually, and I just, by the way, I did the view source if I want to see their code. KGI's is not great looking, but it's well formatted. If I were to do this with, let's say maybe Instagram, theirs is almost certainly going to look a lot simpler. And that's because they tend to hide a lot of their code. And what they'll do is they'll actually put the code in using JavaScript later on. So there's not as much that I can get from here. Now, all that being said, for instance, during COVID, we've done an initiative to try to get clinic information from the LA County sites. And we're able to find that using these inspect elements. And then we're able to do that to get, the proper information for a given underserved zip code or group very quickly and in real time. So it's been very helpful sometimes where, something like LA County, they might get in their own way by having too many clicks that it takes to end up figuring out where a vaccination appointment might be. So what a lot of these organizations, especially government websites, will do is they'll just open themselves up to others who want to maybe improve upon what they've built. So that's one thing you can do with inspect. Oops. Now, let me move this out of the way for a second. Next is console. So with console, what I can do is play with the JavaScript itself. So if inspect is how I can see what the static files are, right? The ones that aren't really changing, that are not dynamic, such as HTML and CSS, console is going to help me troubleshoot with my JavaScript. So one thing that I can do with the console is, I'll just go back to here. I can see what's being printed out. So if my JavaScript isn't working, I can go to console and see, are there any errors that are associated with my JavaScript? Now, some of these might be, yellow is just an alert. Usually you ignore these. Some of them might be red, but they're in some default file, in which case I don't have to worry about it. What you want to look for when you see an error is this line, is this a file that I'm working with? Right? So if I've created like a scripts.js, or if there's I put JavaScript within my HTML file, maybe it's like doctors.html, and then I see a red error that's associated with that file that I'm working with, then I know that I need to fix something in order to get everything to work the way that I want it to work. And then usually it'll give me good information that will help me do so. So as we move forward in some of the demos today, I'll show you how you can use console to improve your code as you're working with it. Another thing you can do within console is if you write this console.log within your JavaScript code, it will actually print out what the variables look like so that you can really see how well you're doing up to a certain point. So if you just want to make sure, let's say, for instance, that the variable that you've created is actually taking the inputs that you want it to, you can do this and it will just print out what you've gathered into that variable into the console. Does that make sense? So it's sort of seeing, are you acquiring the right inputs that you want? And is your JavaScript file on track? Another thing you can do is source. So we talked about elements, console, and then the third and really final one that you need to worry about is source. If you click onto the source header within your inspect element, you can actually dive into a particular file, whether that be a separate JavaScript file, or maybe it's one of your HTML files that contains JavaScript, and you can do what's called setting a breakpoint. Now, a breakpoint is basically you just click this line of code or whatever line of code that you want it to stop at. And then when you end up running the code, whether that be by pushing a button or just loading the page, it's not going to finish. It's going to stop at that breakpoint. So it'll sort of pause and then allow you to go line by line and see what happens. And that can be one of the most powerful ways, really, of troubleshooting your JavaScript code. So you can see here, I'd set my breakpoint at line 10. And then I went line by line until I got to, so I'm currently on line 23 in this image example. And all along the way from 10 to 23, it's telling me what my variables are. So this is sort of like having a bunch of console logs, as I explained here, but all on one screen. So d.glucose or d-glucose, that's a constant. So these are always just going to be d-glucose equals 126 and 48 because I've set them here. These are variables. So in this case, what I did before I got to this screen is I entered 100 in that glucose field, right? Remember, this was the diabetes, figuring out if you have diabetes or not. I entered 200 in the HbA1c field, and then it's telling me this is what's being gathered. If there was something wrong with my code, then this might give like a glucose equals undefined or something. And then you can figure out, okay, what do I need to do in order to get this to be the number that I expect it to be? Does that make sense? So you're sort of like gut checking your code to make sure that the variables that you're setting are looking the way that they should look. One final thing you can do here is within this sources page, there's actually a console. So as long as you're frozen, you can figure out, do these variables exist and what do they look like? So here I just typed glucose in here and put enter, and then it kicked back, okay, well, glucose equals 100, right? Because that's what you had inputted. Same here with HbA1c equals 200, because that's what I had inputted into the form. I could also do something like, let's say that glucose is undefined. So I'm expecting a 100 to show up here or some other number, but it's giving an error. Then what I can do is actually copy this line into the console and figure out what's going on, right? Maybe I'll do just this $ glucose and forget the val, and then see when I do $ or when I do this $ glucose, what's actually coming up. Does anyone know? What does this, so the $ and then in parentheses, hashtag glucose, what does this mean, this line of code? At this point, we've gone over this a couple times, so someone should know. When I type this, what am I trying to do here? Any volunteers? Extra credit, even if you get it wrong?
Is it user input?
Yes. So, and the user input of what? So like, what am I doing here with this hash glucose?
That's the identifier, I think, for the glucose. So you're assigning the user input to that variable.
Exactly. And then what does the hash mean? And
Is it
anyone can
just-
jump in here. Go ahead.
Oh, is it just a numeric value?
So the hash, remember, that actually represents an ID.
Oh,
So
okay.
in my HTML, and that was great, by the way, great answer. It's basically an identifier. So I'm telling the JavaScript to look for some element that has ID glucose here. So that's what I'm doing here. And if you need a refresher, just go ahead and watch last week's lecture where we created that diabetes algorithm. And that's where we explain what that means. So if I were to just put this $ in parentheses, hashtag glucose, then what's going to pop up here is that element that I identified with the ID equals glucose. So you can sort of play around in the console. And I'll show you a little bit of how that works as we go through some of the examples. With other browsers, for instance, Firefox, it's very similar to Chrome. You just right-click the web page and then click Inspect Element, and then it will bring up that same DevTools console. With Safari, it's a little bit more complex. You have to actually activate it first. So if you look in the Safari menu and then click Preferences and then Advanced, in this Advanced section, you would check this Show Develop menu in Toolbar. And then once you've done that, it works the same as the other browsers. So they all work, no matter which browser you're using, they all work very similar to how it is in the example that I showed you for Chrome. So the first example that I'm going to go through is HTTP cookies. So cookies are a nice way to help a browser remember something. And essentially what a cookie is it's a small piece of data that is stored in a user's browser on behalf of a website. So you notice sometimes when you might find that your browser is slowing down, and a lot of the times the first piece of information in terms of tips is, well, make sure that you clear your cookies. The reason is because sometimes sites will store very large amounts of cookies just so that they can remember things about you. Facebook will use cookies in order to deliver ads about you. So some of those cookies might be all the different pages that you've visited. So cookies can be very beneficial for making websites run the way that they want to run. They also, obviously, based on what I just said, can be a bit of a privacy concern. So that's something that you might want to be vigilant if you don't want websites to remember things about your browsing history. On the other side of the coin, if you want websites to be more user-friendly and show you only the stuff that you want to see, then that's an area where enabling cookies can actually be very useful. So it's always that push and pull between your privacy versus having a website that works to its fullest potential to give you a good user experience. Now, we're going to use cookies in this example to try to remember things about a user. And in some ways, we're using cookies as a replacement for a database. We talk about back-end languages, and that's something that I'll explain a little bit next week after we do our presentations. But cookies can be a short-term replacement by having an individual's own browser serve as a database of their viewing information. So this is something that we're going to be able to use if we want to maybe remember that someone likes to, let's say, see cardiac doctors, or maybe someone lives in Santa Monica, and therefore we want to show them doctors or medications that are local to them in Santa Monica. Maybe they have a certain language preference. We can use cookies to remember that. So I'll dive into a demo on how to do cookies. So one thing that I would like to do with cookies is figure out how to make a profile. So all I've done with this profile HTML is I took my index and then I saved it under a new name called profile.html. I saved as because I wanted to keep the same nav bar and then the same scripts. One thing that I did do is I added a script right here. So this is JS cookie. If you want to use cookies in your particular prototype, I would encourage you to use this code in order to activate cookie abilities within your JavaScript. So that's the first thing that's necessary, is putting that js.cookie into your head text or your head section within the profile.html file. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create, just one second. Okay. So I'm going to create a form, essentially. Is going to be the first thing that I want to do in order to enable someone to create a profile. So first, actually, before I even do that, I really want to put it within a container. And with our container, just as a refresher, I'm just setting a margin so that my code is not going to be on the very edge of the screen. So now that I've got my container, I want to just create a header, and we'll call this my profile. And because it's a header, I actually have a class for that I did in previous lectures called text title. Now below that, I want to create a form. So within that form, the first question that I want to ask, we're going to create a label called, what is your name? Oops. And beneath that label, we'll put an input, and then the input will be a type called text. And then we now have to give it an ID. And the reason we're giving this an ID is because we want JavaScript to be able to find this input, right? So this is going back to what we said in the example of the dev tools of how is the JavaScript going to find a given input. In this case, it's going to look for a name. And then just to see who's paying attention, since this is an ID equals name, what is the symbol that JavaScript uses to associate with an ID? Any volunteers? So when it's going to grab something, right? If we use that same example, the $sign, and then look within here, it's going to look for a name, but then there's a symbol that goes right here. What is that symbol?
Joanne said,
Yeah.
Yes. Hash.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Joanne. Ah, there we go. Thanks, Joanne. Great. So that's how it's going to know what the user puts in for their name. Okay. So now we've got name. I'm going to do something else. I'd like to do an image. So in order to do an image, there needs to be a source, which is usually a link. So how about for here, we'll say, please paste the URL to your image. And instead of text, we'll make this a URL. And then the ID will be, how about pic? Then let's do one more. How about a drop down? So please select your role. And then since this is a drop down, we actually have to make this a select element. And then we'll call the ID equals role. And again, the ID, the only reason I'm putting that there is because I want JavaScript to know what to look for. Okay. So now I've got my select, and now I just need my options. So option number one, how about we give that the value of patient? Number two, we'll call it provider. Three, producer. And then and by the way, what I'm doing here is Control or Command D or Control D. It enables me to select the next thing that matches. And then basically gives me two cursors. So I can backspace and then write whatever I want. So this is just sort of a shorthand way of very quickly adding new information. So now I've got my 4 options within my dropdown: patient, provider, producer, payer. And that is what I'm calling a role. Now, in case you're wondering what the difference is between why am I writing patient twice, what is the difference between this and this? Well, the one that's in between the options is actually the what shows up on the dropdown. This value is what gets picked up by JavaScript. So this is sort of what gets communicated with either the backend database, if we're using that, or JavaScript in this case, because JavaScript is going to be asking for what is the value of the selected drop-down menu item. And then the last thing we want to do is create a submit button. So this will be another input. Let's give this another ID. We'll call it, how about profile submit? And then let's see, we had a class for buttons. What was that? How about button example? So we'll give it the class button example. And then in this case, the type, it's not text, it's not a URL, it's submit. And that's how the HTML will know that this is actually a submit button. And then the value will also be submit. And this value, by the way, it's what shows up on the user interface. So let's see what we're looking at right now. So let's go into my sample project profile. I'm going to open this up with Google Chrome. All right, here we go. So what is your name? Please paste the URL in your image, and then please select your role. So I've got what looks like a form. Now there's no JavaScript attached to it, so it's not really going to do anything. But we can at least play with it now. Any questions so far? So now what I'm going to do is write some script. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to just see if I can grab the information from the inputs. So how about we do variable name. Actually, let's do a profile name equals hashtag name. Okay, so what this is going to be doing is it's going to pull whatever element has the ID name. Now, what I really want to do is hashtag name.val, and that's because I want the value of this name. However, I can show you what it would look like if I didn't do that as well. So now profile pic, it's going to be whatever's in hashtag pic. And then profile role is going to be whatever's in this role element. So let's try this out. Inspect. I'm going to go to sources and go to my HTML where I have my JavaScript. So I want to set a breakpoint here. Let's see what happens. So I reload it and you can see that this is grayed out because they've actually paused it. And it says paused in debugger. Now, if I want to just exit out of the pause, then I click this and it says resume script execution. Or I could just go one line at a time. So I'm going to go one line at a time. Now let's see what happens. So profile name. Okay, nothing happened, right? The reason is because I actually haven't put anything here. So if I were to put my name here, now I can actually, I don't think it's going to show up because the script hasn't, it needs to run again. But I could do something like, now that I've got my name Will in here, hashtag name. There, now it shows up Will. So I know that if I put this in, which is actually exactly what I've got, it's going to work. It's going to get me whatever I input it into here. Now you notice that before I did that val, I tried it with just the selector. So only grabbing that element with hashtag name. So it actually gives me a lot more than just a value. It gives me basically everything that's associated with this. So it's a lot of nulls, but it also has, I think there's, let's see if we can find things like, trying to see if there's anything useful in here. There's a lot of sort of unnecessary data that you got to sift through. But I think one thing you can do is it'll autofill certain things. So if I do dot, then you can see that it's saying, okay, well, you probably want val. So I can just click this and then it'll autocomplete. So it's sort of, it'll guide you towards what might be useful. You don't want to know what the HTML is, then it'll show me sort of what that looks like. I actually screwed that up. It needs to be HTML with these parentheses. In this case, there's actually nothing. Okay, so I want to associate this with a click. So I really only want to execute this once I've clicked that input, right? My submit button. So I'm going to say hashtag profile submit. And then on click, I want to do a function. So the function that I want to do is actually this stuff. Just going to indent these so they look nice. So now when I reload, you can see that those changes are showing up on my inspect element. I'm going to change my breakpoint to within the click so that it only freezes my code once I click this. And I'm going to type some stuff. So how about will? And then for an image, why don't I see if I can find my image somewhere? Okay, there, I'm at KGI. So I'm going to copy image address and then paste that in here. And then how about I am a producer? Okay, I click submit. And because I put this breakpoint in here, it paused my screen. Then I can go one by one. And now notice when I go one by one, it's actually picking up my inputs. So now I know that profile name, it is now set to equal will, profile pick, set to equal this long link, and then profile role equals producer. So this is all working the way that I expected it to work. So that's great. Let's go back in here. So now what I want to do is I want to set my cookies. So let me actually comment this code. I'm going to call this get inputs from profile form. Now set cookies equal to inputs. So this is all, you can find this from the cookies. I think it's a JS cookies documentation, a JS cookie. So it tells you how to use like cookies set and cookies get. I can put this in the slides. So cookies. Okay. So I'll share those slides with you after the lecture, but they tell you how to use these cookies. But I will just show you right here. So what you want to do is call this thing called cookies. And then if it's cookies.set, you're basically telling it, okay, set a cookie named something. In this case, we'll call it profile name. And then set that equal to something. In this case, it's this variable. And so now I can do the same thing for profile pic. And I use that nifty Command D thing to create my two cursors to edit these at the same time. Profile pic and then profile role. So the reason I'm doing this is because I want someone's browser to remember when they enter their profile once who they are. Next, I'm going to actually ask a question. If profile cookies exist, show profile, well, just show profile. So I'm going to ask a question. If cookies get, and I'm just going to ask for one of the cookies, in this case, profile name, right? Because they might not have specified an image or a role, but I mean, they're definitely going to have submitted a name if they've created a profile. So I'm going to ask, did they create a name? And if so, we're going to actually insert that name into this form. So first off, let's just do sort of a console log, and then we'll just say something like, yes. Now, I warn you, there might be a bit of a problem because I'm doing this on my local file. So cookies might not work. Let's cross our fingers, but if they don't, I'll push it onto GitHub and I'll show you how it can work. I'm gonna reload. And you can see that my new code is all here. I'm going to submit my name. Let's go with the autofills from my previous entry. And I click submit. So I don't think the cookie worked because it should have printed yes into this console. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push this live onto GitHub. I can show you what it looks like there. Okay, so adding cookies to profile. Pushed. Looks like everything worked. Okay, now I do want to go to, because I actually never created a link for it. So I just need to go to profile.html. And now do this inspect. Where is my profiles? Let me make sure that it did show up. Okay, so changes were made a minute ago. The profile.html. Okay, looks the way that it should look. Might need to give it a second sometimes to actually load onto this URL. Okay, here we go. Now I look, and there we go. Looks the way that I want it to look. So I'll do the same things here. Submit. And then it was very brief because the page actually reloaded, but just pay close attention to what happens here when I click submit. All right, there you can see that a yes showed up. I could also, you know what, one thing that might actually be a little bit more educational is let's put a breakpoint in. Just put it there. Okay, so now we can go slowly. So I've set my cookies here. So my cookie of profile name is Will. Profile pic is this long link. Profile role is patient. And now I'm asking if cookies get profile name, then console log equals yes. And then you can see that it logged yes. So I can actually type cookies get and then put nothing there and it'll get all of my cookies. So you can see that I've got all of these cookies that have been saved, including some test things that I did early on before the lecture. So all of those have been saved in my browser. So that's a way for me to remember what a given user has inputted. That makes sense. I know that's sort of, it's a big concept to sort of get how cookies work. Does anyone have any questions before I move forward on what I'm going to do with the cookies about what's actually going on here? Anyone want to explain back what we're doing with cookies and why they're helpful at this point?
I think one component you mentioned is that you want to see like how active an individual is on a specific website so you can cater ads to them.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing. And does anyone have any ideas of how they might want to use cookies for their particular app, if they will, or how you would use cookies?
A pretty common one could be login credentials.
Yeah, totally. So if we wanted to remember what someone's login credentials are supposed to do, even though we're not using databases for our prototypes, we could actually treat their browser as a database. And that's actually how a lot of websites, most websites keep people logged in so that every time you visit a web page, you don't have to continually log in and put your credentials in. Okay, so let's just move forward and see how we can use cookies to change how a profile might look. It is a bit unfortunate that we can't practice with the cookies on the local, but it's fine. We'll just keep pushing it onto GitHub when we want to check how the cookies are working out. But at least we now know that the cookies work. So one thing that we're going to want to do is I'm actually going to give the form an ID. I'm going to call this the, how about not logged in. I'm going to create below the form a div that is called logged in. Okay. And now both of these, I actually want to be invisible by default. So I could give them a CSS, but instead I'm just going to be lazy and I'm going to give them an inline style called display equals none. And I'll do that here. And the reason I'm going to do that is I actually would like to, I'm going to move this out of my click function. and make this something that just runs on its own when the page loads. So all of this code that's within the click function, it's only going to run if I click that input button that's called profile submit. So that's my submit button. Anything that's outside of there will just run as soon as the page loads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if cookies get profile name. So if they've already submitted their profile, then we're actually going to show this logged in element. So logged in and then show. Otherwise, we're going to show the other one. Not logged in. And I think that's what I called it, right? Yes, not logged in. So even though the HTML by default is making both of these hidden, so this one style display none, and then this one style display none, I'm going to use JavaScript to, in any case, show one of them. So if the cookies for profile name exist, then show the logged in form. And then if they don't, then just show the actual login form that we just created. So the logged in thing, this profile, it doesn't exist yet. So let's just put something here as a placeholder. So we'll call this profile. Now beneath profile, we actually want to create a name. So why don't we call this something along the lines of, we'll make it just a little bit smaller. So name, and then within here, or under here, I should say, we're going to do a P with an ID. And the ID is going to call insert name from cookie. It doesn't matter what you call it. Usually you would probably want to pick a shorter ID, but just to be super clear about what this is doing, we're going to call this insert name from cookie. So we can take away this console log test thing. So if cookies get profile name, then we actually want to insert whatever that profile name is into this. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull that up, insert name from cookie. And then we want the text to equal this. Okay. So this is how I would take a cookie and then put the information from that cookie into the text. Now, this is sort of the shorthand way of doing it. If I wanted to, I could create another line. That might be var cookie name and set it equal to this. And then we can just put cookie name within text, okay? Does that make sense? So we're basically using our cookie to set the text of this. All right, let's do another. So if that's going to be our name, we can also do what the role, insert role from cookie. So this is very similar. You can basically just copy this. Say what we're doing here. So insert profile information from browsers saved cookies. Cookie role, insert role from cookie, and then cookie role. Now, the last one is a little bit more complex. It's not too bad, but we need to create an image. So what we're going to do for this is actually create a profile picture. Okay. And let's actually put this right under the profile. H3, just a header. Well, you know what? I don't think we need to give it a header. But we just create an IMG, so image, and then source equals, I'm just going to put sort of a hashtag in here as a placeholder. That's basically, it's going to be an empty or broken image. Don't even have to put a hashtag in here, I don't think. But we do need to give it an ID. Call this insert pick from cookie. Okay. So I just changed my single quotes to double quotes. Doesn't really matter which one you use, but just want to be consistent. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is get my image. So cookie pick, cookies get profile pick. All right, so it's going to get me this. And remember, that's a link. So I want to actually put this not into the text, but I want to put this into the source. So this is going to be a little bit different. Instead of text, we're going to use something called ATTR, which is basically how do we change an attribute of a given element. And we want to change the SRC attribute because what we want to do is insert this into here. So we want to change that into cookie pick. Okay. So that should work. Unfortunately, we cannot test it on our local because cookies don't really work on the local. But I think this is going to work. So let's just push it and see what we're working with. Adding cookie functions to profile.html. Okay, so you can see that I have now added all this code to my HTML. It's going to take a little bit. I think maybe, oh, hey, that worked. So you can see now that what it did is it put my image right here. So insert pick from cookie. It put the attribute equals whatever's in cookie pick. So if I were to, let's say, cookies remove cookie pick, then it should actually, let me see, cookies.get. Oh, it's not cookie pick. It's profile pick that I want to remove. So I removed the wrong thing. And the reason is cookie pick is just a variable that I created here. The cookie itself is called profile pick. So that's what I want to remove. Just to see if I can break this. If I remove profile pick and then reload, boom, goes away. If I remove profile name, now it actually takes me back to the form. Anyone know why it does that? So I removed the cookie called profile name. Why did it just take away the entire profile and take me back to the form? Anyone want to volunteer why that might have happened? Or what line of code is telling it to do that? something within here. Tristan?
I'm not sure, but line 76.
Mm-hmm.
So you're close. So line 76 is where we create the cookie called profile name. And so that's definitely the one that we're concerned about. But the one that actually has us show the profile form versus the profile itself is line 81, where it's actually asking, does the profile name cookie exist? Does that make sense? So it's saying, if when you do cookies get profile name, if that equals something, then show logged in. And remember, when we were doing the code, logged in is the profile itself, right? Where we're putting the profile name and role. If this is not true, then it goes to else, which is show not logged in. And if you remember, not logged in is right here, our form. Is that clear?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I've done that. If I want to change my name to something else, let's say William. Now I want to use a different image. Or we just use the KGI logo or something. Open image in new tab. So that's a weird logo. Well, we use her picture. Nope. This one. Okay. We'll just copy that. Put that image in here. I think her name is Angie. And then we'll just say provider, submit. And because I put this breakpoint in, it actually froze the code. So if I go one by one, I can see my profile name is now Angie. My pick is now the pick that I just copied from KGI's website. Role is now provider. It's going to ask, oh, this is another thing. When you go one by one, sometimes it goes into like some weird code. So it can, might have to click it a bunch of times just to get to where you want. But should have still saved the cookies. So now Angie comes up. My name is now Angie and I'm a provider. Okay, does that make sense? And then as long as I've got the cookies saved on my computer, whenever I go back to profile, no matter how many times I reload or if I leave and then go back, it always is gonna think that I'm Angie. The only way to remove that would be maybe I would want to put like a button here that says delete account, in which case, oh, why don't we just try that? Okay, so we've got this within my logged in. How about I create a button? Then we'll just give this the ID called delete account. Class, just going to give it the same button example. And then we want to create a click function. So let's just copy what we wrote here, put it down here. Function for deleting cookies. Close that out. Okay, delete count. And then when I click this, I want to cookies, remove. I think if we leave this blank, then it just removes all cookies. Let's actually check that out, see if that happens. Cookie, JS, cookie. I'm just going to search for remove. So if you want to delete one cookie, you do that. Oh, you know what? We can just play with it on our console. So cookies get, that's got all those cookies. Now, what if we just did remove? And then try to do cookies get a get. Okay, so it doesn't really work that way. We would have to remove them one at a time. Does that make sense, sort of what went wrong there? So I was just sort of testing it out. You can see I did cookies get, and then this shows all the cookies that have been logged from my browser. When I tried doing cookies remove, the same way I did cookies get to get all, it didn't actually remove any of these cookies. However, when I specify cookies remove profile name, and then do get again, you can see profile name went away. So I'm going to use this strategy for deleting an account. This is another example of how using the console can save you time when you're actually writing code. So you can write it the right way the first time. So I'm just going to delete everything if someone clicks this button. So name, role, pick. And that's only going to happen if they click this delete account button, which I created here. Just to make it even stick out more, let's make this red. So I actually have to change my button example. I got to create a red one. I'm just going to copy button example red, and then instead of green, it's red. Okay, so that's how I created a red button instead of a green button. So I think this should be good to ship. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to add my new CSS. I'm adding a delete profile button. And push. So any questions while we wait for this to load? Make sure that it took. Adding delete profile button. So that was pushed 18 seconds ago. Might need to wait a little bit for it to take hold. Let's just look at the source. Okay, looks like it's already been put in. So let's add my name again. Just use that picture. I'm not sure which one it is. We'll say I'm a producer. Submit. All right, there I am. Okay, I had to reload a couple times to get this delete button to show up. But now it's here. When I click this, it deleted my cookies. Now it didn't reload the page. So that would have been maybe the next step. In order to, there's a couple things you can do to reload the page. You could either do it through JavaScript, just Google using JavaScript to reload page. Another thing is, you notice that I made this a button, whereas this was a submit input. If I had made this a submit input, so if it looked more like this, you know, kind of like maybe we did it like this, then it would actually reload the page. So that probably would have been the better way to do it. And then I just have to change this to delete account. And you might be wondering why button, we have delete account is within the buttons, whereas input, it's as a value. It's just the way that you're supposed to format inputs in HTML is they don't have anything in between them. Like you have this closing button and opening button, and then you write what you want in between. You just have to display what's on the button using this value. Okay. So that's how I would make the delete account button reload as soon as you click it. But as is, it's fine because all I have to do is just reload the page. Now I'm gone. Okay. But if I were to do it again, I'm a provider this time, I come back. And I could go back to home, back to profile, and I'm still there. Okay. So that's how I use cookies to make the browser remember who someone is. Any questions? Cookies can be kind of complicated art, but once you get into it, I'm sure you can imagine that can be super powerful. In fact, cookies are frankly how Facebook makes almost all of their money. So you could imagine how you could take a simple concept like this and go a long, long ways. I'm sure you've seen this. I mean, this happened to me when I, for instance, was looking at an engagement ring for my wife. Suddenly I started getting all of these ads for engagement rings on Facebook, on Google, everywhere. So they were using cookies to do that. The only way I could stop that, because obviously I didn't want her to see that I was shopping for engagement rings, was to delete my cookies. So that's another way where just understanding how these things work on a little bit more of a code basis can help you out in your everyday life, even if you decide not to code. All right.
I have a
Professor,
question. Oh,
Yes.
sorry, go ahead. Jeff.
I was gonna say, would it work if you just refresh the page? Because I know that sometimes works just to like delete an account.
Or
Or
you
maybe
mean like to clear my cookies?
yeah, to clear your cookies.
Just refreshing the page won't work, but if I were to delete the cookies, I could. Now, it might be that maybe your specific browser, because a lot of this is browser specific. When I do things with JavaScript, the users themselves have a lot of power to block me. So that's why, a lot of the database stuff you tend to want to do using backend languages and databases like Python. But you might have an extension or something on your browser that says clear cookies every time you reload, in which case you're correct. That would just delete your profile in this example. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. So I will just, for completeness, I'll push this change of turning this from a button to an input right now. In fact, one other thing I should probably do is create a link to profile, because you notice I just had to type it into the URL. So I'm just going to do that really quick. We'll add maybe after about us, we'll just create something called profile. And then this will go to profile.html. Adding delete button as an input and link to profile.html. All right, so we'll push that live, and then that should show up after we get to the next lecture slide. Some next steps on cookies. One, you might want to use this to track user preferences in order to personalize your page. You might also want to use it to track recently viewed content. So maybe someone has picked, I don't know, that they're interested in rare disease. Maybe you're working on a community sort of aspect to your application, and you want to remember that the place that they went first and that they really wanted to see was rare disease. Then you could maybe, when they visit rare disease, set a cookie for last visited equals rare disease, something like that. And then when they go to the main page next, then maybe you'll have something that says, whatever the last visit is, send a link or put a link there so that they can just click that button and it says like last visited. So that's another example where cookies are used, is with, let's say, Netflix. If you want to see what you've recently been watching, they might set a cookie that remembers what you watched last, so that next time you visit the page, you can just go straight back into watching that. I know that a couple of your teams are doing map-based stuff. So you might want to remember where someone is. If someone last used it from Santa Monica, maybe you want to remember that they're in Santa Monica so that they don't have to input their location again. And you can also just use it to keep a user logged in. Next up is arrays and objects. So this is kind of the final piece to how you can take advantage of the coding skills that you've learned thus far to really make a fully functional web application. The only thing that you're missing is database, but you can go a pretty far ways using JavaScript arrays and objects. Now, an array is basically a way to store multiple values into a single variable. So I might have a variable, let's say I want to call this variable specialties. And then I could put within specialties cardiac, neuro, muscular, skeletal. And essentially what you have is a variable that has 4 different items. So can anyone think maybe in their application, something where using an array might be helpful, where you want to track several variables?
I think for us, for the podcast at least, we want
Yeah.
to track like multiple variables. When you're searching for the different categories, then we can like search for, like I guess in this case, it kind of shows an example: cardiac, medicine, neurology, or muscular, skeletal, stuff like that. Mhm.
Absolutely. So you might want to store all of your podcast categories as an array. And then I think you'll also see array of objects is probably going to be very relevant for your podcast. Now, an object is a key value pair. So when we talk about a key value pair, what we're saying is basically, if I say X, I want the value Y. So if I say name, I want that value to be whatever has been put here as the value. So name in this case is the key, and then the value is will. Or if I want to say that I actually don't want the name, I want the email, then I would input the key email, and then it'd spit out the value of my email address. An array of objects might be a list or an array, in this case, of a bunch of different objects. So here I might have 3 objects, all of them having a different name and a different email. So going back to that podcast example, you could imagine maybe it's the podcast name. And then how about the podcast category? It might be the podcast link. So whatever that link is to the audio, or maybe it's the audio file itself, as an example. You could also imagine if we're talking about doctors or medications that we want to associate with locations, maybe this is, instead of a name of a person, maybe it's like Lipitor. Maybe the next one is remdesivir. And then maybe the next one is some COVID vaccine. And then the location might be, let's say, let's say a zip code or a city. So maybe it's 90210 or Beverly Hills or Pasadena or Claremont, something like that. So I'll show you how you can use arrays and objects on your actual application. Before I do that though, I'm not going to go into this because this is just a whole lot of information. I wanted to put it here so that you had it as a reference when I share the slides with you. But there's a lot of different functions that you can do, or they actually call this methods that you can do on arrays, including find. So if I want to maybe find the item with here that matches a certain person, right? Maybe someone has inputted, let's say cardiac as what they're interested in. And you could use find to find which element within this array equals cardiac. Maybe you want to just filter by a letter. So something that starts with a C, starts with an N, then you could use this find function to do that. Same with filter. If you want to just filter a bunch of arrays, I'm actually going to show you in our example today how filter works. Then that can all be helpful. Okay, so let's go into that demo. For arrays, I want to use family. If you remember, let's go back into, here we go. Let's go to family.html. If you remember family, we had a table and we also had a map. What I want to be able to do is somehow filter this table for, how about the location that I want? We're going to use arrays in order to do that. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is actually create an array. Okay. So why don't we call this array variable doctors? An array always starts with this sort of square bracket, And that means that I'm going to list a bunch of things. Now, if I put a squiggly bracket, that means that the thing that I'm going to list right here is an object. And that's what I want. I actually want a name. In this case, I'll just steal these names. Dr. Smith. And it's important that both the key and the value are both in quotes. So make sure you remember to do that. Then our phone is going to be 555-222-6666. Then our location. Oops. It's not bad if I capitalize this, but I just prefer to work in lowercase on code. It is important though that if it's capitalized, that anytime you try to call this key, that you're using the capital letter. So it's case sensitive, basically the lesson there. And our location will be Los Angeles. So now I have one object in my array. And then let's do the others. So Dr. Gonzalez. 3. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I unmuted on accident.
Okay. And then we'll make this one in Malibu. And then this one. So now I've created an array of objects, and I can essentially use this as my database. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I want to create sort of a filter that I'm going to put up here. So for this filter, we're going to make it just one of those select option things that you all have worked with before. And we'll call this Dr. City. Our options will be Los Angeles, and we'll create Claremont, and then Malibu. Let's see what that looks like when I reload. All right, now I've got that. Actually, would kind of like there to be a space. This is a kind of I like the way this thing looks, this HR. It's just an HTML element that you can put in between if you want some space. And what it does is it creates a space and a little bit of like a page break thing. So we'll use that to create that space for now. If I wanted to, I could, instead of using this, I could maybe give some CSS styling to Dr. City. In fact, might as well just show you what that would look like. So I would create a CSS styler. Because this is an ID and not a class, it starts with a hash, Dr. City, and then we want to give it a margin on the bottom of about 12 pixels. There. So now there's the space, and it's done through styling. I can see that I've got my 3 different towns that I want to be able to filter by. Going back to family. Now what I want to do is do something with this database. And in fact, I kind of like there to be a few more names if I'm going to be using filters. So how about we create Dr. Shu, Dr. Jones, Dr. Ramirez. Let's give them slightly different numbers. Okay. So this will be my database for now. Now, in this case, I'd actually like it to filter when I choose one of these. Now, there's a nifty way of doing that with JavaScript, which looks a lot like the click thing, the click function. So I'm going to say, when Dr. City. Is that what I called it? Dr. City. So when that is called, and it actually, instead of typing click, I type change. Now we'll do a function. And this function, let's just to see if it works, we'll print something. Console log. Why don't we just print doctors? I'm going to reload. Now when I choose Claremont, all right, it printed doctors. So you can see that they're all now listed in this array. Cool. Now, the first thing that I'd like to do is actually remove all of the existing data that are within here. So the way that we'll do that, and this I just had to look it up to know how to do it, is, so I've got this doctor table. I'm going to ask it to look in doctor table and then find all of my TRs that are GT is greater than 0. So this is kind of shorthand for find all of my rows, right? Each row is a TR. See, like the first one is the TR for the headers. Next one is Dr. Smith, then Dr. Gonzalez. I want to find all of them that are greater than 0. Now, this is a weird thing that you just have to get used to with JavaScript. And frankly, it works for every language, is everything always starts with 0. So your first element is not 1. Your first element is always 0. So in this case, what I'm saying is all of my rows that are not the first element, I want to remove. Oops, let me just undo a little bit. Okay. I want to remove it. Now let's see what happens. All right, now they all disappeared. Now, if I were to just find all the TRs and remove them, it'll actually take away my whole table. Right? Which maybe I want to do. So that might be for your application what you want to do. But in this case, I want to remove everything except for the first row. If I were to maybe change that to 1, then it'll remove everything except for the first 2 rows. So when I change this, the first thing I want to do is get rid of everything except for the header. And then what I want to do is iterate through this array. And this was actually, it's one of the items, I believe, that is listed here. Yeah, so it's this for each. Now for each, what that'll do, and first let me just write it. So my variable is doctors. So this is my array. So doctors for each. Now I want to do something. And this is just the format for each. You're going to have an item and then an index. Okay. So don't worry too much about the exact syntax. What you can do is just, if you Google, how to use for each in this certain context, then you can use this, or you can just, look at my code. But essentially what you're doing is you're saying, go through every item that's in this doctor's array, and then perform a function that includes that item, because I'm going to need that item in order to do something with it. And then the index is just like, is this the first one, the second one, the third one, et cetera, that I'm going with. We're actually not going to use index for this purpose. But what we are going to do is use item. So we're going to ask if the item, then if the city within that item equals whatever the value is of my doctor city, So if that's true, then, well, let's start with that for now. So then let's just do console log item name. Okay, so there's a lot here, right? So first we're gonna go through every row in doctors, and that's what this for each does. And then for each row, which we're now calling item, then figure out what the city is. Oh, and actually I named this wrong. We actually want location. That wouldn't have worked. But if my location, in this case, for the third one, Dr. Smith, it's Claremont, equals whatever the value of my dropdown was, then print out who that is. Let's see if that works. All right, so I did Claremont. So now the value, this right here, this Dr. City value is Claremont, okay? So it's going through each person, and if their location is Claremont, then it's gonna print their name. So what names should I see printed once I've chosen Claremont? Who from this array should show up in my console log?
Dr. Ramirez.
Yep, and then Dr. Smith.
Mhm.
So let's see if that happened. All right, Dr. Smith and Dr. Ramirez. Is that clear sort of how that ties together? We can also just sort of run through this by creating a breakpoint so that we can look at it slowly. Oh, actually, let me put the breakpoint after change. So I'm going to change it to Malibu. So the first thing it's going to do is go to that doctor table and then remove all of my rows, a TR is a row, that are greater than 0. So all of them except for the first one. All right, moved one step ahead and that's been done. Now it's going to go through the doctors, each one. And it's going to ask, oh, I just did that all quickly. Sometimes it doesn't stop where you want it to stop, but in this case, it was Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Jones that got printed out. And that's because we chose Malibu, and Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Jones are the Malibu doctors. Okay, so it asked for that item, is their location item, and this is just the nomenclature that you use to call a key within an object. So remember, these are the keys, these first ones. And then the values are whatever's at the right side of the colon. So if I say item location, it's just going to say, okay, well, what is the value of this? For Dr. Smith, it's LA. Dr. Gonzalez, it's Malibu, etc. So for each item, it's saying, okay, for their location, does that actually equal whatever the value of Dr. City is? And remember, Dr. City is our dropdown. So when our dropdown changes, check to make sure that the key for location or the value for location is equal to whatever that dropdown has been set on. And if so, print their name. So now we're like 80% of the way there. Instead of printing their name, it'd be awfully nice to just put them on the table. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create some HTML. So we're going to call this row HTML, should be a variable, equals, and we're just going to really copy what we've got here. Now, it's always a little bit ugly to play with HTML and JavaScript because it always likes things to be on one line. There are ways to do it on multiple lines, but don't worry about that for now. So I've created basically a really long and ugly piece of code that is the HTML for a row. Remember, I copied that from here. Now I want to be able to insert my variables into that row. So rather than saying Dr. Gonzalez, I'm actually going to break this up and then add item.name. Okay, so I'm putting this within quotes to say like, hey, this is just the static HTML that I want you to use. But then I want you to put this variable in between this static HTML and the next one. So now I actually have dynamic HTML. So that's where name goes. Now I just have to sort of do the same thing with phone number. So end the quote, then add my item dot phone, then put the quote back in, and then this location, item dot location. So now I have the HTML that encodes a row that just so happens to have the name, phone, and location of my array. Last thing I need to do is insert this HTML into my table. I'm going to find my table. In this case, it's called doctor table. And I got that from right here. And then I just append, which is another function within JavaScript, my row HTML. That should work. Let's cross our fingers. Oh. Let's take away that breakpoint. And there we go. I got my Claremont doctors, my Malibu doctors, and my LA doctors. Okay. Now, one thing that I might want to do is, obviously this was more dummy data. I'd rather just use this data. So one thing that we could do is just put all of these in from the start. And we could either just put that in the HTML or use JavaScript to just append all of those really from the beginning. Why don't we try doing that with JavaScript? So we'll just copy this. And then we'll take away the if. So now they don't have to match location. We just want to append every row of our doctor's array to the table. There. So now they're all there. I might want to, now that I've done this, get rid of our dummy data. Now, if you look at my HTML, there's no data. It's just a header, but I'm actually inserting the data using JavaScript. There. So now if I change something, maybe Dr. Smith is actually Dr. Williams, it updates here. Any questions? Okay, well, I want to spend the rest of the lecture working as teams and answering any specific questions that you have about your projects. But why don't we take a quick break, maybe till 4:15. And in the meantime, I'll stick around. I won't take a break because I want to make sure I answer any specific questions that you all have for me.
Professor, I don't know if Alana's on the call too. She might be taking a break, but her and I still wanted to be able to go figure out some more GitHub stuff because it still wasn't working over on my end. I'm getting access to it.
Okay. Let me just push this on the GitHub. And then I'll stop sharing. Okay, so what's giving you trouble?
So I maybe I just need another kind of walkthrough on how to be able to go through and edit her code and then push and pull. But I mean, I have everything downloaded. I downloaded the appropriate kind of software, the Git bash, but I don't know how to actually go about and edit her code.
Mm-hmm. Have you done the git clone?
I think I tried that before, but I could try that again.
Yeah, because I mean the very first step, once you've got your git set up, would be, I guess I can just share my screen again. Okay. Okay. So one of the very first steps is you go to the home page and then you want to clone this.
I want to clone Alana's, correct?
Yeah, this is mine, but yeah, you would want to
Okay.
clone Alana. So you would copy this. You just click that and it copies. Go to whatever file you want to be within, and then git clone and then paste. And then what that'll do is it not only downloads all of the code onto your computer, but it also associates your Git with her repository. So from there on out, if you do git pull, it'll update you with the latest and greatest. Git status, and I'll show you what the differences are, git push, and etc. So are you
So when I tried doing that, it says that I don't have permission denied.
okay? I think I think didn't we work through that problem before?
I think so. I think I tried downloading the zip and then undoing it,
Mhm.
but I don't know if that ended up working. Let me try. I could share my screen too.
Yeah, that'd be great. I thought we solved this a couple weeks back.
Yeah, I think it worked once and then it didn't. And then when I remember when I was updating a code, it wasn't on Alana's code, or like Alana wasn't able to see it too.
Okay.
So I have a question. Not all, I don't know why, but not all my codes are showing up here.
Okay, so not all the codes that you're pushing.
Yeah. Like these aren't like indexed and everything.
Yeah,
but-
we updated this a lot sooner, a lot more recent.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, has it ever been pushed onto GitHub besides the 8 days ago?
I don't know. I mean, I have my code here through Visual Studio, and that's what we've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's just not linking to GitHub, because like our page is updating. So I just don't know why it's not updating here.
So your page, and by page you mean your local page, or actually,
Yeah, the logo. Yeah,
or actually
local.
on the internet?
Like on the internet.
Oh,
Like
interesting. So if you go to,
working.
yeah, let me see the link that's working on the internet. Is that one, the Alana Joshi?
I don't think it's
No.
this one.
It is here.
No, this is one that, see, this is the one that I was able to edit before.
Yes.
But mine is.
But hers is like documents or like users.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's actually not on the internet. That's on her local hard drive.
Oh.
So one of the first things, Alana, that you'll want to do is if you can get it pushed onto the internet. And maybe that's the first thing that we can work on when we get into our breakout groups.
Okay.
And then hopefully we should have you both working off the same GitHub after that.
Cool.
Perfect. Thank you.
let's see. I can start creating those breakout groups as well. Okay, so I'm going to open up the rooms, and obviously we haven't come back from break officially, so no need to join yet. I'll stay in the main room at least until after 4:15, but then Justin and Alana, I'll make sure that I visit you guys first, just to make sure that you're up and running on GitHub.
Perfect. Thank you.
And actually, definitely nobody joined the rooms yet. I'm going to close them briefly because I do want to go over some of the parameters of the final project before we get started on the breakouts. All right, let's get back. Get your laptop or your cameras back on. And then what I'm going to do is just go through some of the parameters of the final project and sort of what's expected for next week. And then we can all break into our groups and I'll answer any super specific questions that you might have about your particular project. So we'll have a solid hour to do that. And I want to make sure we make good use of that hour. So the final project is really two components. One is the prototype code. And with the code, what I'm really looking are, content, which is sort of our HTML component of would that new user that's interfacing with your product for the first time understand the purpose of the prototype without significant guidance. Also design. So are you following some of the design principles from lecture 3? Really here, I'm just looking for this not to look like somebody's blog that they create in their basement, but something just a little bit more slick, a little bit more customer friendly. And then inputs, outputs. So does the prototype take inputs from the user and then transform them into some sort of output that satisfies the core user store? And I've showed you several examples using JavaScript through which you can do this. So really, and any of those examples you could leverage or come up with your own in order to really do something cool with your platform. So that's the ideal, is that you've got a website that looks nice, it's clear what it is, and there's some little button that like you're excited to push during the presentation because you're excited for people to see what happens. And then data visuals is any data visualization used. So I want to see some use of colors as well as tables, graphs, maps, what have you. I think you all probably have a pretty good idea at this point of what type of visualization you'd be using for your particular project. And then commenting. So this is kind of the last thing, the equivalent of when you're doing a report together. You got that final stage where you're making sure everything fits together well and looks nice and has headers and all of that. Make sure that your code does not look like it's just a bunch of patches that are patched together and have nothing to do with each other. Like, try to make sure that it looks clean, that there's not any unnecessary code, and that you've commented what not every line of code does, but what every sort of group of code does. So you can benchmark what I've done on my GitHub as a good example of the level of commenting that I would be expecting in your code. Any questions on the code? Here, like, I want you to try to focus on the user story, but to be perfectly honest, that's been more my like gentle guiding is like try not to do just a sign-in page, try to have something that's interesting. But for the grade itself, I'm really looking more to mastery of code. So I think that the user story component will probably be a smaller aspect of your grade for this final project compared to how it was with the wireframe. And then presentation, really expecting somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes of presentation and then plus Q&A. And what I'm looking for is user story. So did the team describe that user story? So this is how you're sort of pitching it to the group. And this is where the user story does come into play, is just, it needs to be a part of your pitch, right? So it's like, there's a need and we are fulfilling that need. Roles. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about what role each team member played on the team, who did what, and then how you all work together. Methodology, and this gets a little bit into the how you all work together, is did you actually follow the agile methodology? Did you make use of the doc templates that I sent you all? And then how did that team end up functioning together? And then the final component is I'd like you all to talk through user testing. So did the team explain how they used user testing to improve their prototype? And this is where I wanted to sort of push, even from a couple weeks back, to get started on the user testing, because that can enable you to get some really important advice up front. So I want to just get an idea from you all of how you were able to leverage that user testing to make your product better.
Are you sharing your screen? Because we can't see anything.
Oh no. I must not be.
Cool.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah.
So you'll have these slides, but basically there's two components to the project. There's the code, and then you've got your bullet points for what I'm looking for in the code, and then the presentation. And this is sort of how I'd like you all to structure your presentation. And then the part that I'm not really mentioning here, which is of course important, is running through the platform itself. So show off all of the coding that you did, show me all the different pages you created, the buttons, the content, and then most importantly, there's sort of the part that I'm really looking out for is that JavaScript component, like were you able to do something cool with a button push, okay? I actually shouldn't say most important because I think the HTML and CSS are very important as well. But that's the part that I think is probably the most in question right now. And it's probably the part that you're gonna have to work the hardest on in the final week to make sure that you're able to get that final piece in to your project. Teamwork. So I want you all to finalize what features you're gonna add for that final prototype. This is the best chance to ask me questions. please, send me a message if you want me to jump in, but I'll just be roving between the different breakout rooms. I'm going to open them all up right now, and you can go ahead and join the rooms. I would like you all to be prepared to present a little bit of your progress. And I'm talking just like 2 or 3 minutes max, so that everyone can get in a good idea of where the different teams are. And hopefully that serves as a little bit of a kickstart for anyone who might need it. But I do think that most of the teams that I've seen, you're all doing a good job. I think you're all on good track. I think different teams are more advanced in certain areas, but overall, I think it's pretty even. So I'm excited about what we're going to see next week. Okay, so let's get out into your breakout rooms, and then I will join you all shortly.
Too long, too short.
Okay.
Hello, Professor.
Hello. How can I help? It might be helpful if Alana goes first, so that we can get her to put her code on a GitHub.
Mhm.
Let me open.
And then before you do that, if you want to share a little bit of the code or any questions that you have, this would be a good time.
Or I can just quickly walk you through our progress if you want.
Awesome.
We also did a couple different user testing already too.
Awesome.
That was
I'd love
helpful.
to hear a little bit about how that
Mhm.
helped.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So so this is all still the same, like the title and whatnot in this section. We added a map. So here I just said, like, would you like to visit a medical site or doctor? And we have these two. One of the things that was said during our user testings was to maybe add, like, change these into buttons rather than just like bullet points.
Mhm.
So we're gonna change that up. But basically, like, this is your location. We just added like a picture of a man there. And then you click on one of these. And then for here, you just kind of zoom in, and then I added a whole bunch of cars for the drivers.
Cool.
And then you're here, and then these are the different types of medical sites. And if you click this, it'll kind of like say all the hospitals, urgent care, rehab centers. I'm going to add like a few different other types of medical sites, and then drivers in your location. I want to see if I can try and move this structure around. I don't know if that's possible, but that's just kind of the gist of that. And then it's the same thing here. So it's broken up into like specialties, so like cardiologist, neurologist, pediatrician, driver's location. Again, I'm going to add more specialties and whatnot, but that's just what we have for now. And then something else was we're working on this part, adding like your insurance information. I kind of messed up this code here and ended up putting the drop down here, so I need to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just kind of like our idea there, and then we'd probably do the same for accommodations in terms of like listing the types of accommodations you would need. And then we need to add a settings part, and then for drivers, we're just gonna add the pictures of the drivers. We've decided that all the people that are doing our user testing is going to be our drivers.
Great.
And we also, one of the comments was to also add like a rating system here under each driver, if that's possible. I don't know if that's possible or how that would work.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you how to do like a star method.
Yeah.
Like to animate stars.
Yeah, totally. So stars might be a little bit hard, and it's definitely doable, but what you would need to do is you have a couple options. One would be to use an image right? So maybe find an image of a tiny star, and then have like 5 of those that might be lined next to each other. So step 1 would be try to figure out if you can get Jane Doe to have 5 stars underneath her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then once you've done that, you can start to play with maybe making one of the stars invisible if someone clicks like a thumbs down button. And then maybe making the star visible if someone clicks the thumbs up. So that's one option. I think stars will be a little bit harder though. What might be easier would be like a counter of people who like Jane Doe. And then like every time someone clicks like great job, then maybe that goes up by 1. Every time someone clicks not a great job, then it goes down by 1. So that might be like the simpler sort of MVP version of this. But I think stars could work as well.
Sure.
You could also do a combination, right? If Jane Doe has a counter, maybe that counter is invisible. And then the stars might correspond to whatever the value of that counter is. So maybe whoever gets to 100 likes has 5 stars. Maybe if they're only at 80 likes, they have 4, that sort of thing. So there's different things you could do with that.
Okay, cool.
And happy to help if you need some advice on that. I think the site looks really slick. Oh, well, actually, sorry.
We have the About Us as well.
Yeah, so the last thing was the About Us. For this page, we noticed that a lot of people kept wanting to like click on our faces. So we're probably just going to link it to like our LinkedIn page as like a bio thing.
Now, the thing with the LinkedIn that I would recommend is, I imagine if someone clicks your LinkedIn, you don't want them to leave your site. So there's a feature. Have you used the target feature on an Ahref element?
No.
I don't think so, no.
So you would make these sort of, and you know what the Ahref is, right? Okay, so you would turn these into Ahref elements so that they're clickable, or at least you'd put them within an Ahref. Now, within that, and you can just Google this, like Ahref target. And what you'll want to do is put target equals blank. And then if you do that, then instead of it going to LinkedIn from this page, it'll actually just open up that link as a new tab.
Okay.
Which you might want to have so that people don't leave your website, because I imagine you want them to stick around.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, the only other comment I can remember off the top of my head is they kept wanting to click the logo as like the home button. So maybe linking that. Yeah, I don't know. Justin, do you remember any other comments that?
I'm looking over at the spreadsheet right now. People said the stars. They want to make sure that the links work in the settings, but we're changing that. LinkedIn. I think that pretty much is it.
Great. So a few more comments. One, first of all, I think the site looks really nice. I think you're definitely good on the design standpoint. I would say like figuring out what that feature is going to be. So you've implemented the maps, which is really cool. I would say don't spend too much more time trying to add more items to the map because it's not really coding. I would say try to use more of that time to either really flesh out the driver's stuff or maybe the insurance stuff. The other thing that I was sort of thinking as you showed me the buttons, or the buttons that you wanted to put below the map, I think they're bullet points now, is I could imagine, I guess, 2 things. One could be that maybe they are all on the same page, right? And instead you put the maps within a div element that has an ID. And then maybe when they click medical site, it says like the ID of medical sites show, and then the other ones hide. Maybe when they click doctor, then the ID for doctor shows and the other side. Just an option. I'm not saying that's the way to go, but it's sort of a way to incorporate some more JavaScript into that page. And then the other thing I was thinking is, wouldn't it be cool, and this might be sort of above and beyond, but it would be kind of cool if when they submit their insurance information, it remembers that in a cookie. And then somehow it shows them like the map for that insurance carrier.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can imagine JavaScript asking a question like, well, is there a cookie stored for insurance? If not, then just show the generic map. If so, show the Anthem map, right? Or the Kaiser map, that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
I'm not saying, none of these are, obligatory by any means, but just thinking out loud as you're showing me, I think there's several different directions you could go. And I don't think you have to go in all the directions. I think if you did half of those things that we just talked about, I think that'd be a good demonstration of JavaScript. But
Yeah, I think what we were also thinking about for the drivers is that you can also have like a drop-down menu of what city you're in, similar to what you just showed us today.
Mhm.
And you'll see the drivers who are in that city.
Yeah, for sure. So when you input, and wouldn't it be cool if again it's sort of tied to what you input into your the insurance information? Maybe it's the city you're in, so it
Mhm.
remembers that and then only shows you those drivers. I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're definitely on a good path, and I'm glad to see that you're able to get all this done despite the issues with GitHub.
Yeah. But I think that there's a way that we could do it now.
Yeah.
If you
Um,
find a way to be able to upload that into GitHub.
so should I just like copy all my code into GitHub, or like I don't
No, let's try to do it using Git. So
Okay.
were you able to get Git to work at all?
Yes. It
Okay.
said it was working. It says it's uploaded and running.
Can you go back to your Visual Studio Code? And then on the left panel, let's click the Git button, the source control, which is the three circles that are connected by the lines right there to the left.
Oh.
Yeah, that one.
Mhm.
Okay, so it looks like you need to initialize. So you're not quite initialized to a repository yet. Let's click initialize repository. Or hold on. It might be, yeah, let's see. I've never done it this way before. You can also directly publish this. Okay, let's try that. Publish to GitHub.
Mm.
Oh.
Oh, is that it?
Okay, so you're now linked.
So do I just what do I do?
Yeah.
Let me see on your.
Okay, so you can open that up.
Okay.
Okay, and then, yeah, you can publish to, I guess, your public one. I don't know what that is. Keep that away.
I don't know where it went.
So let's click that again. Publish to GitHub. Yes, and then what is the difference? I can't tell.
I don't think there's
Oh, well.
any.
Okay, so let's just do the public one.
Okay. So just okay.
Okay, and then don't unselect the DS store. Don't push that onto a public repository. It's not really supposed to be there, so just uncheck that. It's a weird thing that Mac, I don't know why they do it, but Macs just save these files. And then click OK.
Okay. So,
Okay.
so if I make a change here, it'll automatically change in my GitHub now.
It should now, yeah. So you've actually staged the changes. I don't think that they've gone live yet, but let's see. You reloaded. Let's let it finish.
Yeah,
reloading.
it's not loaded yet.
Okay, so yeah, I don't think it's been done yet. So let's go back to your code. So you can see that all these 23 files have been staged.
Mm-hmm.
So click the check mark, and name this whatever you want to name it. Like initial commit or something like that. Okay. Okay, so you need to do this. I think this is something, I forget who I did this with. It might have been with Justin a couple weeks back, but this is pretty simple. All you have to do is type those things, the git config, global user email, and then put your email there.
In here?
Yeah. You actually have to run it. So
My terminal.
yeah, so copy it and then go into terminal.
Like here or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then paste it. Okay. But now change your name to Alana or whatever you want to change it to. Okay. And then
So just do my normal email or?
yeah, you can't change that because you actually already configured it. But it's fine. Just click enter. And now click up twice. So that's going to go back to email and just set this again and then make this your email, whatever. Ideally, it's the one that you've associated with GitHub, but it won't matter because it's a public source code.
Oh.
So just backspace and then put whatever email you want to put there. Okay, and then click enter.
I do this one. Wait, I just want to make sure I did this one. Pretty sure I did. Yeah.
It shouldn't matter anyway, because Justin will be able to do it too, even though he's not the right email for that repository. Okay, so you're now configured.
Okay.
So now let's go back to the commit. So that checkbox.
That checkbox.
Yep.
This.
And now whatever you want to name the commit, and this should just describe to Justin or anyone else you might be working with what you're doing with this code. And obviously in this case, you're doing a lot of things. So something like initial commit would be fine.
Okay.
Enter. Okay. And now find the next to index tab to the left, there's 3 little dots.
Mm-hmm.
And click push. Your repository has no remotes configured to push to. See what happens when you click add remote. Provide repository URL. So go back to GitHub. Oh, yeah, there you go.
That's cool.
Autofilled.
Oh.
And then just name it. You could name it like Alana Joshi. And then it's asking if you want to run git fetch. That's just sort of a way to automatically keep it updated. I usually don't do it, but it's up to you. Okay. Now I think it's pushed. So let's try reloading GitHub.
On my end, it's not loaded, but
Interesting.
it says 4 commits.
Let me go to your GitHub. Okay, what are these 4 commits? So these were from back in April when you were committing. Can you go back to your code? And then, so it says the changes have been made. Where would it have pushed? Okay, in terminal, type git remote. So it's going somewhere called Alana Joshi. Let's actually. Okay, why don't we just try this again? So let's type git remote space set URL, set hyphen URL space origin. And actually URL is lowercase, sorry. You have to just backspace. It's an annoying thing about terminal. Okay, and then space. Now go back to GitHub. And then do this, I think it should be code, the green button. And then copy that.
Okay.
And then paste that there, yeah. No such remote. Ugh. I don't know what you're attached to right now, to be perfectly honest. Let's see. Type git remote -v.
Minus.
Oh no, sorry. Just the hyphen v. Git remote space.
Wait.
Hyphen v.
Hyphen V, like
Yeah.
that.
Yes. Okay. So I think you're good. It should be. Is there any difference between that and your GitHub that you're on right now?
I don't think so.
Type git push. Maybe we just need to do that. No
Okay.
configured push destination. Oh, git push and then Alana Joshi. Okay. And then copy and paste that that line that they're telling you to use. No,
Okay.
not that.
The one
The
up
big,
top of it.
yeah.
The one up top.
Oh, this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then paste that in and then push enter.
Is that it?
Oh,
Still working?
might be.
It's doing something.
Okay. So should I reload Git now?
Yeah.
I keep doing that on my end.
Oh my God, why is this happening? Okay.
I don't know what's going on with. Oh, you have 2 branches.
I have
Okay.
I have two
So,
branches.
yeah. It's all been pushing to master. If you look on GitHub.
To master. Where is
Yeah.
that?
Oh, look. Shit. Look. Oh, you had two
Oh.
branches here.
I do? Where? Oh. Well, how did that happen? Why do I have that?
Okay, so you just had it somewhere else. That's all. So
Oh,
what
master.
yeah, what we could do is we can just join them.
Okay.
So I can do that for you, so that you won't have problems moving forward. But in the meantime, I probably should jump off to another team.
Yeah.
So if y'all
Okay.
can just discuss some code a little bit more, and then we can maybe fix this after the lecture.
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
Hi, Professor. Good. What about you?
Good. What would you say your big challenges are moving forward?
I think moving forward is just going to be implementing JavaScript coding.
Okay.
Yeah.
You doing all right with Git?
Everything's
Okay.
looking good.
Great.
Did you want us to show you what we have so far?
Sure. Yeah, whatever you want. I mean, I'm not grading you on anything that happens during this interaction. This is all just whatever resources I can help you with.
Okay, that's good. So can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so this is going to be like our home page. So for Medrone, I mean, obviously you know what it's basically about. For this option right here, it's essentially kind of tied towards this. This is showing like the medications that are, I guess, essentially ready to be filled for that specific patient. And then when we click order now, it brings us to a page that shows the same medications. And I think we're probably most likely going to implement like a checkbox here or something like that, just to indicate whether if they want to choose that specific one or not to fill at that specific time.
Yeah.
Just a basic form of like information of where I guess they want it to be sent. And then I'm hoping to possibly implement like saved addresses or like saved names, stuff like that. I guess similar to what you did earlier in lecture today, if possible. And then once we do submit the form, it just brings us to like this basic page that says like the order is confirmed.
Great.
And then we still need to implement other things. Like for pharmacy, we're hoping to implement like each prescription that they have, as well as info of like when or like if they need to contact like the pharmacy regarding the prescription, like say if there's an issue with it or there might be maybe like a contraindication with another medication, and if they want to necessarily fill that medication or if they want to maybe possibly ask to adjust it to something else. And then for the other two pages under order, for check status, we're hoping to put in basically like a progress bar showing possibly under each order. So like it might not be like an active one, it'll be like a static one where one could be basically at like 0%. And for the status, it'll say like, oh, the order is received, but it hasn't like progressed like packaging or anything like that, or like they're filling the prescription. 100% would be like that the medication was either delivered to their mailbox or it was left at their front door. And cancel order, it's gonna be mostly similar to how the check status is, but aside from that, it's gonna have like a button that says like cancel order, and then hopefully like a pop-up will come up saying like, are you sure you want to cancel this order, and maybe try to state a specific reason why they're canceling that order. And I think one thing right now, what we're trying to implement is a map similar to how you had it in lecture. So I've tried just like getting general pharmacies around the Claremont area and like distinguishing them between like ones that are available for drone delivery and ones with mail delivery, and just try to kind of pick random addresses for the patient's home address. So I know I had it, where is it? I had the lecture open somewhere right here. So I know earlier you had it so the map formatted only for your selections. So I'm not sure if we need to like broaden it out and it shows it that way, or oh, yes, it does. Okay, so it can't be too zoomed in, I guess, so it won't show like everything else on the map, right?
Yeah. What one advice that I might have is, so when you told me that you wanted to remember addresses, I was gonna say, I think that'd be cool if it connects to something else, you know? So like not
Okay.
remembering addresses just to remember them, but remember them in order to create some sort of cool function.
Okay.
So since you're bringing up maps, one example of how that might work could be maybe based on their city or something, it would show them a different map. So maybe you create a Pasadena map, a Claremont map, and a downtown LA map. And then based on what they put as their city, it might make a different map show up. So then on the JavaScript, you could imagine a setup where it says, if their location cookie says LA, then show the LA map. If their location cookie says Claremont, then show the Claremont map. So that's one way that you could go. One caveat that I would give you if you go that route, though, is that you don't want to, it is possible to have maps that are like based on actual location or zip code, but for your purposes, keep it simple. So
Yeah.
maybe just like, it only works if they input Claremont under city and, you know, a couple more cities, just so that you can show the functionality. Because all you're trying to do is show how it might look. You don't have to be perfect for everyone, if that makes sense.
Okay, got it. I guess coding wise is gonna be a lot of work, or I guess just understanding how to get that done. But I understand the gist of what you would want us to do.
Yeah, and the easiest way to implement that with the maps would be to just create like 3 or 4, however many different maps you want, and then just use the JavaScript show and hide function to just show the appropriate map based on their location.
Okay, sounds good. And I guess another thing is, we wanted to have like the ability to, I guess for this option right here where it says chat with a representative.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it's beyond the scope of this class or not, but like, you know how for websites, they'll have like a little pop-up chat function or something like
Chatbot.
that. Yeah, I'm not sure if that might be too much work for like this.
Well,
Or,
you know, I don't know. It might and it might not. What I would encourage you to do is just what I would do if I wanted to implement this on my site is I would Google JavaScript chatbot and then just see what shows up. Because there might be an option where all you have to do is paste like 3 lines of JavaScript code and then a chatbot shows up.
okay.
Like this one looks pretty good, where it's like, it's enough code that like you're demonstrating that you know what you're doing, right? As opposed to some things where it's just one line. I'm like, okay, well, it's cool, but like didn't really show any mastery of coding. This is sort of looks like the right amount of work where you're having to integrate HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but then once it's there, you've really shown that you know how those fit together to create the chatbot.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, like that's sort of, that looks like the right amount of work to implement.
Okay, sounds good.
But maybe that's not the answer. Maybe it's a different chatbot or, you know, some other solution that you
Yeah,
want.
I'll definitely look for ones that I guess seem more suitable to what we want specifically.
Mhm.
Yeah. Aside from that, I think that might be the gist of it. We're also gonna add like a simple like about us or team page
Mhm.
that I guess everyone will most likely have. I think that might be the gist of it so far.
Have you learned anything from the user testing?
So that's for Maria and Michael. I think they were dealing with that yesterday, so they can speak to you about it if anything, or if they have any input.
Yeah, I do. So we initially, like when we did the user testing, we had a different layout for the for the website. And so there was like some pretty good feedback that we had where, for example, like when they added to cart, it didn't show like the correct total, or there we had just inserted a map that didn't really make sense. Like it was just pasted in there. So the user was confused as to like the functionality of the map. So when we took all of their inputs and like either deleted or like modified our web page, because before it was a little bit more not very clear, and we had like other unnecessary images or like text correlate. So we took those out, and then we split it up into separate tabs. So now like each function will have a different functionality, whereas before we just had everything on one interface and they would just scroll down.
Gotcha. That's great. I mean, that's a perfect narrative, and I would definitely encourage you to highlight that in your presentation, because I think that's a perfect example of how when you're coding something, you get your head in the sand, and you're just so in it that you don't really look at the little details like that really stand out to a user who doesn't know what's going on. They're like, whoa, what happened? Because like for you know what happened. You know what happened behind the scenes as you were clicking the button. But they don't, and they don't appreciate what goes behind the scenes, and little things like how the cart shows up can make a huge difference to the user experience.
In terms of the presentation, do you want an actual PowerPoint presentation and then we can shift over and then show our concept design on the web, or do you just want it all together?
I would like it, whatever is going to be easiest for you to present it. I'm not going to grade the PowerPoint itself. All I'm going to grade is the presentation and the code.
Okay.
So in terms of what you need to polish, it's really just that. And if you don't want to do a PowerPoint, then that's fine too. If you think you can deliver a nice tight presentation just by going through your documents, that would work.
Okay, and then based on the functionalities that we currently have on our webpage, would you say that there's something that we're like extremely lacking or something that we can improve upon?
I think the visualization is a key component. And then I really like to see things that are tied together, through multiple features, right? So something like integrating location with something, or costing things out in the checkout could be one area to focus in. The progress bar, I think, of where the delivery is, I think would be nice. But I think you guys are making pretty solid progress. I think it's just a matter of like, I think you've got like the start of a bunch of features, and just bringing one or two of those to full completion where you can show that and really like wow the class of like, look at how we were able to use several concepts that we learned in class to create a function that would be useful to our users.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, when like, let's say that you're actually pitching this to an investor, that's what they want to see is like, what is that, what is that true moment of realization of like, ooh, that would be cool. I wish I had that app,
Okay. All right,
But
thank you.
I think you guys are showing good mastery of the design elements and the content. And now it's just sort of using some of those JavaScript principles to drive everything home.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Oh,
Well, you
I
can
don't,
ask
I don't
him.
know why.
Hi, Metapod. How are y'all doing?
Oh,
Good,
hello.
how are you?
Yeah, we're having like trouble putting codes in. You know.
right,
John,
well-
do you want to start?
Oh yeah. So as I said before, I can't push. Or no, I can't push. Can I share, please?
Yeah, you can share.
Cool, thank you.
I also just got the same problem where I can pull, but I can't push.
Where is it? So let's see. So I already connected it all, and I logged in, and it did the git config whatever. I'll just put. I added the test thing here. right? And then I went over here, I staged it, and I committed it. This is a test. And then it's gone.
Okay.
And then when I go to,
Oh, you have to push.
oh, I still have to push it?
Yeah, commit is a step before push. So then, yeah.
Oh, well, I guess I didn't do it. Because I had done push before separately, and it
Mhm.
didn't even pull that. Oh, I guess it's in the browser. Cool.
Try running pull first to integrate your changes. Okay, I would not do.
Oh,
Oh. Well,
It actually
not-
looks like you're fine though.
okay, sorry.
The reason I said I would not do it is because it might overwrite your code.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a bunch of code there that you want to make sure that you've got.
Oh no, this is the one that's on our GitHub now. I just added this line.
Gotcha. Okay. So what are the
Check.
problems? I see 12 problem. Oh, that's just with your code.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think
Oh,
that's
that was
fine.
another question I had. But
Mhm.
should I try pushing it? right
Yeah,
now?
let's try that. Okay, it looks like it pushed.
Which one was it again? Was it browse? Cool. So it went. I just didn't do it right. I didn't push. Okay. Sorry. So I guess the second question I had was it was about Java.
Huh?
So when I do I only write it as like a script on the bottom, or can I have a separate script file that I have a source as? Because I
Yep.
saw like you had a source one, but you also put it at the bottom.
Yeah, I put it at the bottom just for simplicity, but I think I'd showed maybe 2 lectures ago that you could add it as a separate file.
Okay, because
So
when I did
either
it,
one works.
okay.
Usually the reason, well, honestly, most people in sort of like real companies, they'll always have it as a separate file. But for your purposes, it's not that important. The reason you would want it as a separate file is if you wanted to use that JavaScript on multiple different pages.
Yeah.
Right, because otherwise you'd have to paste it onto each page. Whereas if it's a file, then it's just one line of code, reference the file to use the JavaScript.
Because I tried doing just referencing it, and then it would just not work. I think like the whole, because what this one does is I'm doing sorting by topics.
Mhm.
And when I did it before where I just linked the source, like the whole table would just go away. Even though
Gotcha.
it's not, I don't know.
It
But I'll
might
just put
be
it at the
that you
bottom.
had to, I mean, honestly, it's not that important. If you're okay with it being on that page, just keep it as a script at the bottom of the page. But if you want to troubleshoot, just let me know what the error is and I can help you solve that. It's probably something like either the path needs to be altered a little bit, or maybe the source file is not updated on GitHub, that sort of thing.
Okay. And I guess now that I have you looking at this, what kind of detail would you want out of, I guess, this kind of page? Because right now I just have it searching by topic, and you can click, I only set it up for nursing right now, but you can click nursing and it goes to the podcast that I have nursing for. And then you can search through, like by name. But I guess, is there more that you would expect of us?
Yeah, so it looks like what you did is you link to nursing, and that links to another page where you've only written the nursing ones down. Is that correct?
Yes.
So one thing that I would encourage you to do is try to take some of the elements that we learned today on using arrays and arrays of objects to, instead of having this this data being implemented just through the HTML, to have it implemented through JavaScript, because then what you can do is use things like the filtering that we did during lecture, as opposed to having a link to a different page. Because in this case, what happens is if you were to change the description of nursing for whatever reason, then it'll change on this page, but not on the nursing page.
Okay. I
So
see.
I'd encourage you to use JavaScript to improve upon that.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
What else? Well, walk me through the rest of the page, and we can see what else might need to be done.
On mine in particular, or like,
Either one,
or just-
maybe someone else's.
Okay, I guess I can just go through a run through
Mhm.
of like the website.
One thing, I know that you guys requested an extension for the user testing, and that's fine. I mean, it's not graded per se. It's only graded as part of the final project. What I will say though is that all of the other teams have learned a lot from their user testing. And so the last thing you want to do is learn a lot on Friday, and then you have 2 days to implement what you learned. So that's the only caveat, is it might come to bite you. And if it does, it's going to show up in the project itself. But if you're confident that everything's going to go well, then that's sort of up to you. But just beware that I'm a little bit worried for you guys if you wait until Friday to get all that user testing done.
Okay, I think our plan is that once we get all the code like implemented to website, because I know John was having problems with his, we can start our usability testing right away.
Mhm.
And I think so, since we're about to fix it today, we can start it by tomorrow and hopefully
Okay.
get responses right away. Mhm.
Sounds good. Like I said, I don't hold it against you at all. I just worry about the process leading to lesser results.
Right, okay. Okay, anyways, I think for like any major changes, really, like our homepage is still pretty much the same, but we did like fix these links. This one goes into the account. I'm working on it, the my profile page right now. This is the account page, but like the forms aren't showing up, so I'm trying to fix that right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still in the process of doing it. Like I'm fixing the code.
Mhm.
For the help, I added these links. I think Tristan's in the process of fixing these links and making it more presentable rather than just being blue links right now for our help page. John is about to implement his browse page because this is our template right
Mhm.
now while he was trying to get that in there. And we're also thinking of like an episodes page right now where when you click on what John showed earlier, it will go into another page with the podcast on it, and you can click play, and
Mhm.
and we're gonna add like comment boxes on the bottom as well so people can leave the reviews.
Great.
Mhm.
I think that would be a really cool thing to add, is the comment boxes, because I think that would enable you to demonstrate a good amount of use of JavaScript in order to leave those comments. So I think that's the thing that's missing here, is just a little bit more of that using JavaScript to make the page dynamic. And I'd encourage you to kind of look at some of the other teams. I'll be honest, they're a little bit further ahead, but that's not to say that you guys won't, come through at the top, by the end. So I think there's a little bit more work to do to integrate JavaScript and make the pages more dynamic, but I think you guys can get there. I think you guys got a lot of great ideas, and use me, use your classmates as well. If you want to jump over to some of their pages as well, maybe after I leave, you're welcome to do that. But I think there's a lot of potential here, but I think it's going to involve probably a decent amount of cramming over the final week.
Yeah, I mean, I think John has some JavaScripts going. It's just we haven't been able to put it on the
Sure.
website yet. So
Okay, great. Any questions for me? All right, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
all
Thank
right,
you.
thank you.
But yeah, hopefully it won't.
Hi, team. How are you doing?
I
Doing good. How are you?
Good. Sorry you guys had to wait the longest. You're my last breakout room. So how's everything going with the project?
Pretty good actually. We're just we
Great.
have a few questions about like one of our buttons, because we have like half our website, but in order to get to that half of the website, you need to click on one button.
Mhm.
And that's like, it's not taking us there. But if we were to like type it in like the search bar, like HTML, it takes us there. So it's like live, I guess, but one of our
Okay.
buttons is like not working.
All right, let's look at the code. Let's see what we can figure out.
Okay, 1 second. Okay. So I'll just show you on this right here. Let me see. Okay. So like this is our home. So like we click on the login.
Mhm.
And so when you click on this, oh wait, now it's work. Oh no, because I think I'm in my,
So it works on your computer, but not on.
yeah, exactly. So it's supposed to take you to this, but when I click it, when it's like online, it like doesn't work. Gives us this.
405 not allowed. Interesting. Have you tried Googling what 405 not allowed means?
Yeah, I don't, it said like it's configured in a way that does not allow you to perform a specific action.
Okay. And that is, let's go back to the page.
Mhm.
So you click sign up and that's what causes the issue.
Yeah,
And where is it supposed to go? It's supposed to go to overview.
overview.
And you said if you just type overview into the URL, it works.
Yeah. Like, so I'm gonna go back, for example, and then if I go here, overview, it works.
Oh, well, that is bizarre.
Yeah.
It probably has something to do with JavaScript that you have attached to the sign up button.
Okay, I was the one that did that. So,
I added something to it, so maybe that's why.
oh, okay.
Um,
I have no idea. I think
yeah,
it was in
no,
here or
okay.
something.
Do you want to show your login HTML on the Visual Code Studio? So let's see. Where is it? Line 37.
Mm-hmm. So form action.
Yeah, I have it as form action because when you click on it, like it didn't do anything. Like form action wasn't there, so I added that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, it's probably that. I've actually never used that before. Now, one thing you could do, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's try it. What happens if you delete form action or just cut it? Because I'm going to have you put it somewhere else.
Like, what do you mean?
Like do the Control X to cut.
Cut?
Yeah. Or the whole thing, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's fine. That should be enough. Cut that. Yeah. Okay. And then go up to the form. So the sign up form, line 33.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
And you see action.
Yeah.
Put that HTML that you just cut into there. So paste it in between the quotes.
Okay.
Okay. And then just neaten that up. Okay. That might work.
Okay.
Because
So
then what it's saying is that when you submit, its action is going to be to bring up that HTML.
okay.
That might work. I don't know if it's going to work, but it might. So much of coding is just trial and error.
Yeah. So what I have to like do the whole push thing?
Yeah. Well, could you try it on your local?
Okay.
Did it work before on your local? Was it just
Yeah, it
GitHub?
worked before on my local.
Okay. Well, let's see if it works again on your local.
Okay. How do I do that again? Let's see.
So the thing with the blue one on the
Oh,
left. Yeah. And then just add that.
like this.
Mm-hmm. And then the check mark. So you've now staged that change and now you want to commit it with the check mark and then just type whatever you just did, like remove form action, that sort of thing. Okay, so you definitely have to configure everything. Okay.
Sorry, I don't know what this is.
Try, did it might not have, it might be that you've never configured your
I
repository.
don't even know what configure is.
So you have to just do what it says. If you scroll down to where that it gave you the error, scroll up a little bit. Okay, so do you see just up a little bit more? Okay, right there. It says,
Oh,
please
please.
tell me who you are. So copy the git config stuff. And then go into terminal. Up. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. And paste it. Now change your name. So backspace a little bit to your actual name or whatever you want your username to be. Okay. And then click left a bunch of times till you get to the email part. And change that to your email. Okay, and then delete that M. Now push enter. All right, now you're registered. Or you're configured, I should say. So go back to GitHub. All right, sorry, not GitHub, the code. Now click the checkbox. And then type what you're doing. They're removing
All right, I removed
form action. Okay, now the three dots that are next to the checkbox or check mark, and then push. All right, now it should be pushed to GitHub.
Okay.
Go to the GitHub homepage.
Wait, GitHub homepage. What was that?
Yeah, I think it's 2 tabs to the left.
Wait, what do you mean?
I think it's right there. You already have it open on one of your
Oh.
tabs.
Oh, this one right here?
No, it's up top. You see the
Yeah.
405 now.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, now go to the home.
Home.
Yeah, cool. Okay, now does it look like you pushed anything just now?
1 minute ago. Remove
All right,
form.
so you're good. So now reload the page that you were working off of. And then go to login. Yeah, still didn't work. So what happens when you push sign up? Does anything happen? Is it?
Or like I can switch between these two.
Uh-huh. But the sign up button, does it actually do anything or is it just kind of for show?
No, it's just for show.
Okay, so we actually don't even have to make that a button then. Let's just, or we don't have to make it a submit input, right? So if we go back to code, find that sign up button. Okay, so instead of making this an input, turn it into an ahref. You know that element? Yeah, you got it up for like home. So just turn it into that instead. You can give it the same class as button, but just make it an ahref that links to,
Like this.
yeah, so exactly like that, but links to overview, and then give it the class of button and call it sign up, that sort of thing.
Okay. So I would just erase all of this right here and replace it with that.
Only that button. That's the only thing you need to change. So that line 37, because that's the line that's given you.
Oh, okay. So I just replace it with this, like.
Yeah.
And then just, what was it? Sign up.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think you want the class to equal button, right? So that it looks the same. But you can figure that out.
Okay, yeah.
How to make it look right. But if you do that, that shouldn't give you any problems at all.
Okay. And this is going to go to overview.
Mm-hmm.
Or no?
Okay. we don't have that much time left. I think I got to bring everyone back together, but hopefully that helped. And
Yeah.
I like the way your site looks. I didn't get a lot of a chance to see the functions, but I think the site looks really nice. So I'm excited to see what you all come up with next week. So
Okay. All right.
if
Thank
you
you.
want to come see me to talk more about the functions, just sign up during office hours or send me an email.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We were gonna leave, but then we just stayed.
Sure. So am I in your breakout room or am I in the main room?
No, you're in the main room.
Okay, great. So I'm closing all the rooms right now. You're free to go. I don't have anything else, but like I said, I'll stick around if anyone's got any more questions.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. So we are past time. So if anyone wants to leave, welcome to leave. I'm encouraged by where a lot of the projects are. And if you have any questions, I'm here for you, especially this week. I want to make sure we get it all right in the end. But I'll stick around here for a few more minutes if you got any questions for me. But other than that, class dismissed.
Professor, on our project, you said you're going to try figuring out the two branch method thing.
Yeah, I'll try to get your branches combined so that you won't have any problems moving forward.
And then after that, I should try doing the git clone, which should work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see if I can just.
I have a meeting in a couple minutes, but we can also email you and see if that works.
Absolutely.
Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you, Professor, and thank you, Alana.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, Professor.
Hey, Joanne.
Sorry, I have a question in regards of like how much like functionality do you want in like our pages?
So I'd encourage you to take a look at where the other teams are. That they've shown some of their functionality. If you want, you can show me some of yours right now. Otherwise, I think they'd probably give you a good benchmark of where you want to be. What I like to see is different parts of JavaScript interacting with each other to create a nice looking feature. But I think a lot of it depends on sort of you showing me what you've got, and then I can give you feedback of directions to go.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it is just like linking pages at this moment. I haven't like really gone down to like the content of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then in regards to like the login page, I know you said not to like focus in on it, but I was thinking like initially to like also add like cookies into it, instead of like just populating it over to the overview page, but actually like having it save cookies so that it can auto-populate into like those demographic pages as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great use of the login page, definitely.
Okay.
And whether you call that a login or a profile or whatever, some way to collect relevant information from a user and then show how the site dynamically changes based on what they input, I think it's a great idea. And I think that would be an excellent showcase of how you're able to use JavaScript to make things happen with your site.
Okay. And then I guess like when it comes to that, then it's just like I feel like maybe we have to fix that sign up button to actually transfer the information over to the other side.
Well, this is maybe something that's also giving you trouble with the sign up button is you're asking it to do two things, right? You're asking it to go to a different page and potentially do other stuff. So one way around that is to actually do it all within one JavaScript script. So maybe what you'll do is your first 20 lines are JavaScript saving that data into cookies. And then maybe that last line is actually a redirect. So I'd encourage you to Google JavaScript redirect page to see how you can actually just change the page that they're in using JavaScript itself.
Okay, so not like the ahref stuff.
If you want to do JavaScript function with that button, then correct. Ahref would be the wrong way to do that.
Okay.
Because ahref just sort of overrides everything, and it'll actually, if JavaScript is running, it'll interrupt it to go to the new page. And then once you're on a new page, the JavaScript that whatever was running, it's no longer works. The only way that it can talk to each page can talk to each other is through cookies.
Okay.
So yeah, that would be my recommendation would be to just do what you need to do with JavaScript on that button, and then at the very end use a JavaScript. I believe redirect is the term.
Okay, I'll look into that, and then
Let me make sure though. Let's see, JavaScript page. Yeah, so if you just Google JavaScript page redirect, there's like 5 different ways to do it. So
Okay.
you can pick which way you want.
Okay, great. I also have another question. I guess I was trying to like link icons to make it clickable.
Mhm.
But maybe I was doing it wrong, so that I wasn't able to.
So is it only appointments that is clickable?
So the text is clickable, but I was wondering if like the icons could also be clickable.
Yeah. So ahref is kind of like a wrapper where you can put whatever you want within it. So what I would encourage you to do is take whatever the ahref is that you've put around the title and just put it around the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
So just put the image within that ahref.
Okay. Because I was trying to do it separately.
Mhm.
Got it. And also, I guess like, so this is Google Chrome, but then if I open Google or like Safari, the layout changes. I don't know how to like make it consistent.
Don't worry about it. That's kind of a tedious part of web development. So you've experienced how different browsers can treat a website differently, which is probably one of the more annoying parts of web development. But I would say it's probably not worth your time to try to spend effort on it. Just pick the browser that you like the best for your site and then use that for your presentation.
Okay, got it. Okay, I'll do that. And then in terms of, I was talking to my friends for user testing. One of them pointed out that instead of like having patients enter information, but to actually take pictures of like the business cards and stuff, especially for folks that aren't like tech savvy or like computer literate. But I wasn't sure, so I tried this. But I guess I just need to figure out how to tie that in to actually like populate onto the page.
Yeah.
Update and save.
So for that, I think what you're going to have to do is just, if you want to do that, just show that you can choose a file, but you're not going to be able to incorporate it, unfortunately, because you can't store a file like that as a cookie. So this would be something that you would totally be able to do if you had a database and a backend that could process that. But because you don't, there's not really much you can do. And that's why, for instance, when I showed the profile picture, instead of uploading a profile picture, I said, put the link to your profile picture, because that's just kind of the limit of what you can do with cookies, if that makes sense.
Okay, yes, that does make a lot more sense now. Okay. Images. So should I actually just like pre-populate some images to show then like how this would work?
Mhm. Yeah, that would be a good idea.
I will do that. And then- I guess that's also like a side note, but I was wondering like if like after like this class is over, I was wondering if I could still like ask you for help in terms of like actually wanting to like create like a
Yeah,
system.
absolutely. Last year we had a student who ended up going into PhD programs for computer science, and so I love seeing that sort of thing, and so anything I can do to encourage you all to take these projects and use that as an excuse to learn how to code more, I'm all for.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And honestly, this is the best way to do it. It's like Codecademy, it helps and it's probably necessary at the beginning, but the best way to learn how to code is to have a project that you care about and to continue to build on it. And it's like, oh, I want to learn how to submit insurance as a photo. And then you just Google around and you figure out people who've done it before. And then you take some of their best practices. And that's how you become good at coding more than anything else.
Okay. Yeah, because I know like my friends also talked about like, oh, like because it's like HIPAA violation or like privacy stuff, then it's like maybe we should have like for the login to have like the privacy information, like
Yeah,
oh,
totally.
like actually have that, and then maybe like a two-way identify or factor verification to make sure you're actually the person.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I think like that's like out of the scope for now.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
Cool.
yeah.
So I think the site looks great. I think it's more at this point focusing on putting some of that functionality into the site. And I'd encourage you to look back at the once I'm able to post the video to see what some of the other groups are either looking at doing or have done, and that might be able to spark some ideas.
Oh, sorry. It just so from today's lecture for the table and it's auto-populating, I was wondering if we're able to also like hide certain rows or like filter through certain rows too.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, similar to how we did it in the lecture where you could put some sort of parameter and then, there's different ways you can trigger JavaScript. You could trigger it on changing a dropdown, which is how I showed during the lecture. You could also trigger it, maybe there's a search field, and you could trigger it every time someone pushes a key on the keyboard, then the JavaScript will fire and then look into what you're searching. And then you could sort of run it the same way that I was running it, where it'll look to see if there's a match. And if there's a match, then it'll load it into the table. If not, then it'll leave it out.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking in terms of like my daily log page, like to give patients like full autonomy of like what information they want to track and then what they want to see. So it's just like
Mhm.
how to incorporate that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's a lot of potential. And I think, like I said, I think the design is solid and it'll just be putting some of the functionality in.
Okay. Thank you so much,
Right.
Professor.
Thank you.